Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for attending the Coming Out in the Game Industry panel, Part 2. I say Part 2 because I did this last year at GaymerX 2 and learned a few things, met a few people. It was really a lot of fun. So we're bringing an entire new panel on for this second one, except for myself, of course. Fresh perspectives, fresh stories on coming out in the game industry. Quick survey, who is in the game industry as like a developer, publisher, that sort of thing? Okay, so we got about 40-50%. That's cool. Okay, good. Who's interested in going into the game industry? Okay, cool. All right, that's good. And then hopefully you'll get something out of this. So my name is Matthew Anderson. I am a community manager in the game industry. I work at 6 Foot in Houston, Texas. And I've been in the game industry for about 10 years now overall. All community management. I love communities like you guys here at GaymerX. Is half the reason why I'm coming, just to visit and see everybody here. So a quick update on the industry. Where is it right now as far as LGBT and acceptance in the industry? It's I have to say, from my experiences, a lot better. The first time I came out, which was technically actually at the GaymerX 2 panel last year, I expected some flack, some people that maybe didn't accept who I was, that sort of thing, and I didn't get any of that. And I'll share some of that a little bit later when I go into it. But I want to introduce the rest of the panelists first. Here we have Donna Prior on the end here with the lovely hair, and then we have Joe Pereze. I got this totally out of order. I haven't had coffee yet, by the way, excuse me. And David Gator, thank you, David, for coming. And Joe Carriker. Did I get the last name right? Okay, thank you. I'm on a roll. Usually I get these names all messed up. Sometimes I forget my own. Coming out in the game industry, what does that mean? Let's just roll right into the stories of what each of us has experienced. All of us are pretty much in the game industry in one form or another, developer, community manager. So I'll let each of you introduce yourselves, your name again, and a little bit about yourself, what you do in the industry, what you like, and share your story.
Me first?
Sure, if you want.
All right. Here we go. I think I got this. Hi, everybody. I'm Donna Prior, also known as Denicia in any kind of game forum that you may have seen me in. I've been working in the games industry for 8 years. I am currently the community manager, team lead at NMass Entertainment. We make Terra Online and a few other games. And I've worked, I also work at Green Ronin Publishing. So I work in tabletop also, and I do event management. Yeah, it's like, yay! And I'm also the executive director, founder of OrcaCon, a brand new all-inclusive game convention right outside of Seattle. So this is very near and dear in trying to bring more, talk to tabletop, because we don't get a lot of representation coming out in tabletop, which in some ways can be a little bit more difficult with grognards. It's true. What else do you want me to do? You want me to go into my stories?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Dive right into it.
Dive right into it. So I haven't actually been kind of in or out for a long time. It's one of those things where, when I finally said, you know what, it's a coming out day, I'm just going to go out there and say it, that, that I'm pan, I'm poly, and kinky, and yay. And everybody went, yeah? So it was kind of a surprise, but there were a few people. It was more actually players of the company. Not the company I worked in that were the problem when I first did this, but luckily when I did this, I was working at a company that was really, really cool, which was ArenaNet. And with ArenaNet has many queer employees. There's a lot of trans women that work there, genderqueer people, non-binary. So it was not hard to do it there because you have the support. But there's other companies I've worked at that if you're the right kind of queer, if you're monogamous, and you're cute, then everybody's like, oh, yay, we celebrate pride, we support you. But as soon as you say, this is my husband and this is my girlfriend, then they don't want to hear that. So there's been some companies where I've worked where people are not cool, but I also worked at one company, the first company I worked at in the games industry. I was actually at a kink event, and we were doing demos. It's called a Try It, You'll Like It, or tasting party. And I was strapped up in saran wrap, and a bunch of my coworkers came in. So, I was naked with only wearing socks, because I love wearing, Y'all can't see my socks if you're watching this on video, but so that was my kind of, well, I guess I am out and nobody cares kind of thing. So that worked out really well. But most players are supportive. On the new game, I do a lot of live streaming. They've noticed my Pride jewelry. They've noticed that my hair color matches my Pride jewelry. So there's a lot of people who are really acceptable. But I also get, I don't want to use words that are super triggering, but you can imagine the kind of words I get sometimes on the stream. Mostly it's that I'm old and fat, which they don't like. It's okay. Some people are like, well, we don't care if she's queer, but she's too old to understand video games. So ageism is actually something, because I'm in my 50s, ageism is something that I have to deal with, especially as a community manager being out in front of everybody. Because obviously I'm old. I don't understand technology nor video games. So my experiences have actually been quite well, but because I have a lot of privilege, I look cis, I'm white, so sometimes the things I say is people listen to me, and so it's my job to help others. So actually, Matthew, when he was going to come out, he told me, he's like, I'm gay. I was like, really? He's like, I want to come out at this panel. What do you think? And I was like, it's awesome. You should totally do it. And so we had lots of talks. So that's my thing, is getting to be supportive for people who might not have the same support network that I've had. I worked on Star Wars: The Old Republic. Nobody cared. I've worked on, well, I won't say the games I've worked on where I didn't get the support, but I didn't care. I just did my time, and but my boss was extremely supportive, and that was the important part, is that she was there for me, no matter what I was going through at work with whatever kind of crap that people might want to throw my way for being poly, because that's apparently a terrible thing to be. It's okay if you're queer, but So anyway, that's my situation. So I'll pass it on.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I'll use this one, sure. All right, my name is Joe Pereze, and I work at a company called Cyan. We're known for making mist and ribbon. And I've been in the industry for 5 or 6 years or so now. But I started, my first big company was at this place in San Francisco called Kixeye. And I was employee 45, and I think I was the only gay guy and probably the only one that's not white, or that wasn't white. So, but we got bigger and bigger and got to know the people better. But I still was pretty, I didn't really want to, come out and just say I was gay ever. So, but eventually the awesome people there were like, oh, we already knew somehow. I don't know, they just already knew it. So, yeah, that turned out to be fine. And then when I went to Washington to work at Cyan, I was basically like a fish out of water there again, so it was happening all over again. And that place is way more conservative, and I've met Trump supporters and stuff, so that's that's really weird. So we also share a parking lot with the church too, so so yeah, and actually I just drove by this store the other day called it was like a barbershop, but it had boobs all over it, and they're encouraging you to bring your guns in and stuff. So I don't know. There's just over and over. I just feel like this place kind of sucks. Spokane does suck, but anyway, but the company's great. So, but yeah. So one of the first early on, they asked me if I was married and stuff at the company. I just didn't know what to say. But then it ended up being that 3 of the people there were gay. We're only a team of 19 there, whereas at Kixeye we're 600 or 700 when I was there. I was employee 45, but that's how big they grew. So, yeah, I guess I just learned that it was fine. Everything was fine, and you really shouldn't hide anyway, because if people end up being assholes, then it's good that you know early on. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for me, I guess.
Can everybody hear? Everybody okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. Just give us a shout if you can. Huh?
Just speaking into the mic.
Okay.
Hi, my name's David Gator. I work at BioWare as a writer. Most recently, I was the lead writer on the Dragon Age series of games. I started with BioWare back in 1999. It was my first job in the industry. Well, I've only been with BioWare, which means I'm not quite sure how it is elsewhere. BioWare is in Canada. It's a pretty liberal town, Edmonton, even though it's in the Texas of Canada. I guess we're sort of the Austin of the Texas of Canada. But I mean, even when I started, I mean, I didn't intend to work in the game industry. I didn't apply. I was sort of a friend of mine who worked there gave James Olin, who was the lead designer on Baldur's Gate, he gave him some writing I'd done and suggested that I might be a good fit. So they called me out of the blue. I actually turned them down initially, and then ended up getting fired from my other jobs. I thought, okay, well, maybe that job offer is still good, and it was. But I wasn't out. I was a little bit older than everybody who worked there. I mean, I was 27, do the math. And everybody else was sort of just out of college. It felt a little frat boyish to me. And I mean, I was kind of, even though I wasn't in the industry, the jobs I had previously, I was just very accustomed to keeping my personal life separate from my work life. And just the way the game industry was back then, I didn't think that my sexuality intersected with what I was doing for games anyway. And it didn't occur to me. It wasn't like I was concerned about that. It just, even though when James brought up the idea of doing romances in Baldur's Gate, I didn't suggest doing like having queer options or anything like that. It never dawned on me that was even something that was remotely possible. So I mean, I just assumed the same that the people I worked with, they're all sort of, a bunch of frat boys and stuff. It's just not relevant. And I actually maintained that for a number of years until I remember, Canada's had gay marriage now nationwide for about, 10 years, 12 years? But initially, it was just a couple provinces. Ontario, the big one, was sort of the first one. And I remember back then, one of the programmers that worked in the company sent an email around, said that him and his boyfriend were going out to Ontario to get married. And I didn't even know he was gay. And all the responses just uniformly were like, "Oh, that's awesome! It's way to go! Yay!" And I felt really kind of sad. In a way, I mean, I was really happy for him, but I felt kind of sad how I grossly underestimated the people I'd worked with. That I kind of just assumed that they wouldn't accept me and that I couldn't be myself there. I just, I was a writer and that's all I was. And it was nice that I kind of casually mentioned it. And they was like, "Oh yeah, cool." And we just went right back to Ahmed. And I was like, "Oh, well, now I feel really stupid that I kind of built this up in my own head." Oh, all right. And it's funny because it was even though we had romances going on, it is still the idea that we actually would put gay characters, bi characters in as a romance didn't even come from my team. It was actually the Jade Empire team, a game I didn't work on, where the writers there said, "Well, what if we had some same-sex options?" And the higher ups were like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And I heard that I read about an email, and I was like, "What?" How is that even possible? Well, I was just imagining that this game would come out and there would be this massive public outroar. No, it was fine. And again, I felt kind of stupid, but this is a long time ago. Things were a little bit different, but I was really gratified. And I mean, I don't doubt that every company isn't the same, but BioWare has been really good. Electronic Arts, actually, in general, for such a big company, they're really supportive. They make an actual effort to go out of the way to be inclusive, to be sensitive to, most recently the transgender issues are sort of becoming a thing that the company is aware of and trying to educate the people who work at Electronic Arts on if someone's going to transition, what not to say, what's okay to say, just how to be sensitive to it and make that sort of thing easier, which I think is amazing. So it's a nice environment, and I know not everybody gets that, but it's been a great experience for me.
My name is Joseph Carriker. My background is primarily that of tabletop publishing. So I have been in the industry since about 2000. I have worked on a ridiculous number of games in that time since I've done design work for 3rd edition and 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons now. I've done a mess of World of Darkness work, Exalted over the years. I'm currently the developer for the A Song of Ice and Fire role-playing from Green Ronin, as well as done some Mutants and Masterminds and Fantasy Age and a number of other things for them. And even before that, I've always kind of had a presence to some degree in the sort of, old school like role-playing communities. Because a lot of that interaction was often online, it was sort of easy to some extent to take a very militantly pro-queer perspective in some of that. Some of the games that I was playing, like those from White Wolf, were going out of their way to feature queer characters. And of course, you would inevitably see people crop up objecting to that. And I might have a little bit of a reputation as being somewhat of a firebrand. And so I'm sorry, I was raised in Texas. I don't suffer fools lightly. And it sort of shows. So as a result, like by the time I was writing professionally and this sort of thing, the vast majority of the people that I was working with, they already kind of knew who I was. I was the guy who, when the head of Westboro Baptist Church first sort of hit the big national scene and his name was all over the place, I was the one who sponsored the contest for people I wrote up a set of stats in the World of Darkness for him and then had everyone kill him in brutal ways in their games and share the stories. So I had a little bit of that sort of reputation already. But in 2007, the company that I was working for at that time, I had been hired by White Wolf to be the developer for their Vampire the Requiem game line. And about that time, White Wolf had been purchased by CCP in Iceland, the folks who make EVE Online. A year and a half to 2 years ago, they started sort of integrating us a little more closely. And so suddenly I went from being the developer of a published line of role-playing games to a content writer for World of Darkness Online, the ill-fated World of Darkness Online. And so, suddenly I moved away from the ivory towers of publishing down into sort of the larger kind of population of the company who didn't all know me that way. And so suddenly I found myself in this kind of weird place where I was used to sort of being thought of in in my coworkers' brains as sort of queer by default, right? Like that was just straight up part of my identity. It's what people knew about me before they even knew me personally. But that wasn't the case anymore. So it was a weird sort of like this second wave of coming out kind of thing. And again, I mean, I'm not, I'm not terribly subtle. I'm not like, we would be in content meetings talking about, because of course, World of Darkness take place in big urban centers and they're talking about the bars and whatnot. And I'm like, so what about the gay bar? And of course, half the room looks at me like, oh, what? Like, he's serious. And the other half were like, here goes Joe. So, but so it was a very interesting process, especially because sort of the larger population of CCP's folks were super bro-tastic. Like, it was a very kind of like, I don't really work for a game company. It's really more of a, like, Hollywood-style fraternity. Like, not even actually what fraternities are like, but what you imagine they're like from television. And, all sorts of ridiculous, like, middle-of-the-day drinking and just, like, the whole 9 yards. And people wonder why that game didn't happen. Anyway, shade. So it was a process, and I had people standing by me the entire way, and in return, I made a point of kind of being the person who was out there. Like I would be happy to wear that scarlet letter, because it meant that there were other folks who were already kind of working in the trenches, who had been working there before me, who felt like I was kind of a comfortable person to come talk to and be like, so here's the thing, and and people treated me decently, so I feel like I think this panel is important because I think, just as in with every other walk of society, right, the more of us who are out, who are just here living our lives, being queer, makes it safer for other people to do so as well. And I feel like that's super important. Which isn't to say that anybody should feel like they have to, because we all have to sort of take our own safety into account. But, just recognize that depending on where you're at, depending on what that society is that you're talking about, there's an element of heroism there, right? Like, it's a scary thing to put forth in that way, but the more of us who do so, the sort of bigger of a safety net we cast for other people who may not feel safe enough to do so yet. So, yeah.
Thanks, Joe. I actually have a question for the panelists. I was thinking about what parts of my story I would tell, because this is one of the reasons I went last year, because I tend to babble. Let's see, what time is it we got? Oh, God, phone, please work. Okay, perfect, good. We're on time. We have 2 community managers and 2 writers on the panel. So our entire panel is filled with people who have had a face in the community as well, not just on a development team and within the industry. So is there any stories that any of you have that just strike you as, oh yeah, I met that one community person who knew I was out in the industry, and they said, what? Good or bad stories, anything that maybe the audience would be interested in hearing from the community side, not just developers.
I don't know meeting, but I guess talking to people online, like on forums. I was actually on the Bioware forums quite a lot, and for quite a while, somebody would say something that, being an asshat, as people do on forums. And when it would sort of, I could address this if I brought up the fact that I was gay, and I avoided that. This was even after I was out at work, just because you work in the industry, but you know that the moment you put that out there, you add an asterisk beside your name a little bit, because from that point on, forevermore, you're no longer a developer. You are a developer who is gay. And you don't really know if you want that asterisk necessarily. So somebody would say something, and they talk about the gay content we had, say, in Dragon Age Origins or Dragon Age 2, and I'd be like, ugh. And then I think it was after Dragon Age 2 came out, somebody had an issue with Anders, one of the characters, the male character, that made a pass at you regardless of whether you had expressed interest in him first, which, because that, God forbid that somebody should do that, and you should have to just say, no thanks. And I decided that I wasn't going to put up with that anymore. And it was nice, because I thought my response to this fellow went through several revisions. It's like, no. And I thought I had stepped over the line with my response, because I basically took him to task and said, look, the romances in this game are for everyone. They're not just for you, fuckhead. And nicer than that, after the revisions. But even so, after it was done, I sort of went to my boss, Aaron. He runs the Edmonton office, and I said, so Aaron, I kind of laid into somebody on the forum. He's like, oh, what about? He's like, well, he didn't like Anders, and he kind of he basically expanded that he's like, he just said, I just hate the fact that normally all I have to say is gamer, but now I have to say straight gamer and stuff like that, and I kind of laid into him. He's like, oh, well, good, fuck him. And I'm glad that I edited it a lot, because my somewhat diplomatic response got picked up and kind of spread virally around a bit. So I was like, phew, that could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah, it's really funny, because at the same time that happened, I was working on Star Wars: The Old Republic. another BioWare product. And we had in our forums, this was before beta, but somebody innocently started a thread whether or not there were going to be queer characters in Star Wars The Old Republic, because anybody who is really a Star Wars fan knows there are queer characters in The Old Republic, not just from Knights of the Old Republic, but also from the books, from the EMU, especially if you read Karen Travis. It's not really out. Some of it's a lot subtle, as much as like, oh, and me and my husband or whatever. It's a lot more subtle. It's not really out there like everybody says, in your face. I don't want it in my face. But so somebody started that thread, and all these people went nuts. I know, you want to say something.
It's always down your throat.
Yeah, I know. It's like... That's one of the things, you sit around the team and you read it out loud to everybody, and everybody at their desk goes, It's like, oh, if you could be so lucky. and so there was this thread started, and it got out of hand because I love you Star Wars nerds. I mean, I'm representing today, but some of you have a problem. And so the community manager at the time, actually this is how I got my job, was because I talked about how this was handled badly, how I would have handled it. But to be fair, who knows how I would have really handled it? Because that was a forum, even before beta, that had 500,000 people on it. 500,000. That's even before beta signups were available. So it was really hard that all these people, so he said something about these are terms that are not used in Star Wars, which brought everybody else out. And, it was basically a long, oh no, you didn't do that. You didn't say that really. And then you had everybody on every spectrum coming to fight on one thread, and it was thousands of responses and huge fight. But because we're trying to be supportive, we had this one thread called the same gender romance thread to discuss it. And that was brought up. That was very much for our side, that was very much of well, look at over here over BioWare and look at Dragon Age, and this is a really great response. So, so this was a lot of things, is that a lot of the queer people are saying, well, what if you, dude, straight white dude, what if a girl you think is ugly hits on you? What do you do? And they're like, well, I just tell her no thanks. And I was like, what's your problem? And so then we actually started getting guys that would just, oh, okay, I get it. And so that was really cool, but this was an ongoing thing. So that was brought up many, many times. And when I did a year contract, and when I left, that was still going on until BioWare made an official announcement, or the Austin studio, about how that was going to work. But people were really upset that their companions were going to hit on them. And then everybody else was just like, oh, you don't know much about BioWare. Why don't you go play some Knights of the Old Republic? And then they got into, there's no gay characters in that game. It was like, no, we're going to tell you about them right now. But yeah, it's really fun that they went back to your comments and how your team was handling that, to how our community responded to your community.
The RPGs, MMORPGs, all these kind of games that have characters and an opportunity for you to socialize and meet others is some of my personal most favorite kind of games, partly because you get to meet people that are playing a role perhaps that they are not normally in public, because they have a fear of coming out in public, but they are more comfortable in games. And there's actually a couple of panels. I'll have one that I'm moderating tomorrow at noon. Hopefully you'll be there. And there's a couple of others as well that are talking about diversity in the game industry and how we can actually inject more of the natural ability to express yourself in games and all sorts of other things too. And these RPGs, and I mean, Donna and I have grown up on MMORPGs, and my career got started in MMORPGs, and I've seen a transition there, an incredible transition from the complete inability to really express yourself to nobody gives a fuck. And really, that's, I think, the message that we're all kind of saying today here. What time is it again? This is a Note 5. It's a really cool phone, but damned if it's slow on turning. Okay, 1:31. Perfect. We're still on time. Okay, so how about my story? I guess I could tell it really quick here. One time in Wisconsin, Do you know where this is going already? Okay, so I grew up in Wisconsin, and for a long time I was a fan of games. I loved playing them, but I was huge in the closet. There was no opportunities to get out and just meet other people like this or anything at all. Very conservative town, and so I just kind of buried that side of me for a long time until I realized that, hey, these games I'm playing, well, shit, I can actually do something with these, like for a career. Holy cow, I can't believe that. There's actually a career in this sort of thing. And at the time I explored the community side of it, MMORPGs were exploding in growth. EverQuest 1, Ultima Online, just the beginning of the graphic MMOs, and then into World of Warcraft and so many others. And I realized, hey, I see these community managers doing their thing here, so I think that's a thing, right? I mean, I guess they're talking to me. I'm in the game, and there's somebody that works at the studio, so that must be a job, right? And I thought, well, maybe I can do that. But ooh, wait a minute, back up here. How do I do that with this one side of me that I have? And today, I'll just say right away, if that thought occurs to you, that you want to be in the game industry and this is your passion to create art, to create music, to design characters, to be a writer, to talk to the community as a community manager, or any of the many other diverse community-facing roles. IT, support, it goes on and on. Any skill that you have probably somewhere applies in the game industry. So if you want to couple your skill with the game industry, you can do that. And you should not have to be worried about this, but that other side of me. And for a long time, that, I think, held me back from really charging ahead and, well, for starters, getting out of Wisconsin. Or should I say specifically Nina. There's actually a song, Where the Hell is Nina? Look it up on YouTube. You get a complete history in 2 minutes of my town. And I said, well, first, go to college, duh. So I did that. And then I said, well, wait a minute. There must be another perspective of the world before I, leave Wisconsin and go to California, any of these hubs of the game industry. I want to see the world and, get some perspective outside of the immediate people that I've heard about in the United States, because that's the industry that I grew up in. The MMOs generally started there at that time. Now it's different. You get MMOs and other games from all across the world, Europe, Asia, and elsewhere. And I said, well, okay, let's go somewhere. And so I took a year and I taught English in China and explored the game industry there and learned that it's definitely more conservative than Wisconsin in some parts, I do have to say, sadly. Now, this was several years ago now, so hopefully it's improved by then. But in other areas, it was very much like we experience here in big cities, with opportunities abounding for anybody. So if, for whatever reason, you want to leave the United States, I'm a fan of somewhere in Europe, and I hear there's game studios there, but I don't know what their social side of it is. Well, go over and fly for starters if you want to check it out. But there's more opportunities. There's more people there probably thinking the same thing you are than you realize. And that's one of the big lessons that going to China, coming back, really getting my career started in the industry taught me, was that the industry is becoming more accepting every day, both internally and especially externally. There are going to be those people, like we talked about in the forums, who, well, that's odd, they may say, or that's not what I believe, or anything like that. And as community managers, we have to sometimes suck that up and respond, that's okay, put on the smiley face. But understanding that that's one person, and there are so many more out there that may think that who you are doesn't matter. Anybody else have any other stories before we? Maybe we'll go into Q&A in a minute here. Oh yeah, one second. We are on time again. I don't know why I checked this thing. I really don't.
Can I actually add to something you just said? So a point that I've brought up to other folks before, particularly when the topic of those people that you're talking about, right, the folks who are out there in among the fan base and the consumer base, or whoever it is that you encounter, who have very visceral sort of like objectionable reactions. Like a thing that I've always sort of kept in mind that it may just be me, brings me a great deal of comfort, is that it seems like they're louder now. And part of that is just there are more fora, right, for them to speak these things across. But the other part of it is anytime a particular mode of thought begins to die out of a culture, the few people who still hold on to it scream loudly. And every time I encounter those forum posts, those sorts of things, I can't help but think, you are a symptom of this vociferousness that I'm getting, right? This like viciousness that I'm hearing is solely there because this type of thought is going away. You are the last shriek of the dying breed, and it gets louder, but it's also a sign of it starting to go away.
Sort of like they feel like they're being oppressed,
Yeah.
like they're the minority, and that's because in a way they are. I mean, and it's not real oppression. We know that. I mean, we all carry our privilege to one degree or another, I suppose. But they suddenly do not have everybody just sort of falling into line with what they're thinking by default, and that makes them feel uncomfortable. So I mean,
and it's weird. It's like they act like people who are in minorities are treated badly or something.
Yeah, I'll take it. Maybe slightly off subject, but I think I agree with you that the industry, like inside of it, is pretty accepting and more progressive and stuff like that. And I love that about it. But in terms of the games themselves, I think we still have so far to go. Because it's great to have options. That's a great first step and stuff for. Well, it's one of the first steps, I guess. And there are some indie games like Read Only Memories and stuff that have gay characters in them, but we don't have like a Gears of War, like I always wanted a Final Fantasy where the main character is gay, but they don't make a big deal about it and stuff like that.
That's kind of the games I'm working on right now. In a way, they're RTS games, real-time strategy. Any Command & Conquer fans here? StarCraft, that sort of thing. Yeah. How do you put a gay character in StarCraft? You don't. There's no characters. So it's maybe that kind of difficulty that.
Oh yeah, it depends on the game, definitely. But Final Fantasy characters look hella gay already. They might as well. Especially 15, right? They can all just have some great, group sex and all that. So.
Well, I think one of the things that's helped in general, never mind what kind of game it is the social aspects that we're all experiencing. Who has a Twitter's account? Donna, you don't get to raise your hand. I think I actually put it on there for you. I apologize to Joe. I'm sorry I didn't put your Twitter account on there. If anybody wants to connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, any of our social sites, let us know. We're pretty open there. But in regards to that, there are tons and tons of groups on Facebook and Twitter, and I could go on and on. Maybe one of you can, help me on listing some good groups that, for coming out in the game industry or just coming out in general would be good to join.
Well, I've got, some of the things I'm on is Facebook groups. There are so many queer Facebook groups out there for all different kinds of, whether it's games or whatnot. But there's also stuff like for locally. We're very lucky in Seattle, that's where I live, is that we have meetup groups on meetup.com. There are board game and indie game developer. There are game meetups, 3 or 4 per night, every night of the week on meetup.com, because we have a really, it's very geeky up there, really. Because we've got tabletop, we've got video games, we've got a huge indie presence, we've got, the PAX, the Emerald City Comic Con, so we have these really big giant events too. And so meetup groups, there's actually a lot of them that are starting to come up about not just playing games, but working in the games industry, where you can meet and network, and there's a lot of queer ones too. There's a group for like Queer Geek Seattle. It's a huge, large group, and so we do not just games, but we do just it's mostly games, but we do all kinds of stuff together. But a lot of it's networking with other queer people in the industry too. And it's a good way to meet people, to find somebody maybe who can mentor you to help you get your foot in the door in the industry. Which, as a community manager, I get that a lot. How do I get to be in the, how do I get in the games industry? Is like, first of all, if you want to be going to programming, go into programming. Don't go to game design school. Go to programming school. Learn how to be a programmer. Go work in the insurance agency, in the insurance business, the medical business, make a ton of money, get great benefits, work great hours, and then realize that, if you want to follow into games, you at least have something there already. So there's places in there that can mentor you into that kind of thing. So that's one of my recommendations besides the Facebook groups. There's also the International Game Developers Association. It's primarily video games, but it's trying to get more inclusive to tabletop also. And if you're a student, they have student memberships, and then they have other memberships that you can get if you're already working in there. And there's an LGBTQAI plus, kind of the whole quilt bag group there. And we're starting to do a lot more stuff. And we get together at big events, and we have meetups, and we have networking. So you can find a lot of folks to talk to about it, about working in games. And then we also say where to go, where not to go, things like that, where you might have troubles. And, talk about relocation and how you can find a good place for that.
I actually came out on Facebook. I think I mentioned that briefly. This was at GaymerX last year. And I had this panel, and before it I was thinking, well, I didn't come out to really a few friends and family before, didn't come out to anybody at work, nobody on social, God forbid. I mean, wow, once you post something, it doesn't, you can't take it back, right? And so social kind of scared me for a long time there. So you know what I did? I just did it all. I said, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna post on social, hey guys, I'm me, thanks for watching. And I did that on the panel. I had my laptop here, and I posted on Facebook, I'm at this panel, I'm coming out, crossing my fingers, and then at the end of the panel, I read back some of what people said. Now this is on my Facebook page, coworkers, regular friends from Wisconsin, I don't know what that means, but friends from Wisconsin, and everybody. And I was just bracing for some assholes and everything in between. And I got a lot too, I only got the best praise. It actually made me cry just a little bit on the panel. Coworkers and people at work that I thought were going to have a problem with it said, hey buddy, that's awesome, then congrats. So that right there said to me, social or not, or however far you want to take it, when you're ready, there'll be people to support you on it. So with that, thank you, panelists. Let's take some Q&A. Yeah, sir, you're here. We can, if you guys can't hear the person who's actually, you know what? We have 3 microphones. How about I just take one out here?
All right. Thank you. So I have a question for David. I love Dragon Age. It's one of my favorite video game series ever. I think the Land of Thetis is like one of the most immaculately crafted video game settings ever. And it also kind of provided my coming out story where I worked at GameStop because they asked the golden BioWare question, which is, who did you romance? So that's how that happened.
Who did you romance? Who did you romance?
I'll keep you guessing. But what I was curious about is that playing the games, one thing that always struck me was the whole mage thing in the game. And I always kind of, because when I knew that you were gay and you were the lead writer, I always wondered if there was kind of like a subtext there, because to me it kind of felt like it, because you have this like oppressed minority that was born with something that separates them from everyone else, and the in-game religion doesn't like them, and they try to like regulate them and keep them down. And there's this whole thing with being made tranquil and how you can have it taken away from you by force, and it's awful. So I was just curious if I was right on picking up on kind of like an LGBT subtext with mages, or do you think it was like almost subconscious? What do you think?
It wasn't intentional. Actually, I remember the writers and I had a conversation where we thought the Darkspawn were the gay subtext in Dragon Age. But not intentionally. I think you can look at a lot of oppressed groups and find commonality. I mean, maybe I have some insight on oppression. I mean, I am male and white, so I mean, not that much. But I mean, I don't know, because it wasn't just me either, right? We have a group of writers, and we all work together. But no, I think that was just a something that comes up as themes of oppression that we can have things we find in common, or maybe it developed as it went along a little bit, because you do see elements of that, but yeah, not intentionally.
Yeah, and by the way, in Dragon Age Inquisition, I romanced Iron Bull first, and then Dorian.
I've been hearing that a lot here.
You write. You wrote Dorian, right?
I wrote Dorian. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was my first gay character I got to write personally, which is
who
great.
wrote Iron Bull again?
Patrick Weeks.
Yeah, that's right. And then I have a whole bunch of questions about the setting and stuff, but you're at a panel tomorrow, so I'll just ask them then.
Yeah, that works.
So.
Thanks for the question. Any other questions? You have one? Can you hand the?
Yeah.
So this question is sort of for the whole panel, anyone that wants to respond. What I kept kind of hearing coming up in multiple stories as you all were telling them was that coming out isn't a single time event. It's something that we constantly do over and over as we enter new environments, as we encounter new people. And I just kind of wanted to get your feeling on when we talk about coming out, there's sort of this perception, I feel, especially among straight people, as like, it's a one-time affair. It's you do it and you're done, and that's never been my experience. So to what extent would you say that maps onto your experience of things, that this has been, you're constantly having to go, oh, by the way, I am the gay person, I am the queer person, etc.
Even once you've come out, you will encounter somebody who's just started at the company, or you'll meet somebody outside the company, like at a con or something, and you'll be chatting, and you think you're as out can be, and then they'll be talking about their girlfriend, and they'll ask you about your girlfriend, and you have that, oh, great. I got to have this conversation again. Well, all right, here we go.
No, I think you nailed it exactly. Like this is, once there, like we sometimes talk about, that when you come out, and usually what we're talking about is the first time you come out, right? Because it's all totally new territory. We've never done it before. And you're right though. I mean, it's a constant process. It's something we do over and over and over each time we enter a new sort of dynamic. And I think one of the important things to remember is that we ease that process when we're in whatever that environment is, and we have people around who already know us, right? Who already know. Like I find that a lot of times, because there were always new people coming into CCP when I was working there, and they were always bringing new people, and like I never really had to come out to any of them to some extent, because I found that just in sort of the standard socialization, I had so many people who, were very comfortable with me being queer, with me, and so when they would introduce people around and that sort of thing, the topic would just sort of come up. And, I encountered a bunch of new people who I had never come out to personally, but they sort of already knew, right? It sort of entered this sort of like, an aspect of the culture. And so, and I think that's important when you're talking about coming out for the first time too. Like it doesn't have to be a big announcement for everybody that's a surprise. Like, to be honest, I told people, at where I worked who were talking about coming out, that in some ways that's kind of like running a resistance cell. Like, find a couple of people that you can trust who will have your back when that time comes. Right, and then they'll be there, right, and then they'll be in and among, right, everybody, so that if somebody does speak up, they can be like, okay, now hold on, sort of a thing, and like just knowing that I have people out there who are ready to say, I know you think you're being funny, but you're not, like tremendously helps that process, and who I know that if I have a really rough time because of it, those are the people that I can go to, and then we'll talk shit about the people involved. But you know.
Well, that said, I think it gets easier every time you do it. At least for me, like it's sort of like when you're not in the industry and you're coming out, and then after a while you stop really caring. You care less and less, and then you just blurt it out eventually. But I think I'm feeling the same thing in the industry. But the main difference for me was like going to this ultra conservative place, and it like reset it, right? So it kind of depends where it is too. So yeah, but you're right, totally.
As Donna and I are in the industry, we're community managers and thus very much in the public sphere. And this is something that maybe you can follow on this if you want, has made me think after coming out on Facebook last year, what would happen tomorrow? There's always that possibility. I did that main coming out. This was an excellent question, by the way. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I'd have to do it again to somebody I don't know, or a new community that I'll be managing in the future. And so it's going to be an ongoing process. But like Joe and others have said, there's always the team, the friends, the group, the one person that has your back. And oftentimes, this is a general community thing that I found. As a community, there's always, no matter what happens, whether it's about you or something else, something with the game, somebody who's being an asshole or a troll or something will be pushed back by the community, and you'll just sit there and you'll watch and you go, yep, I did my job. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, to kind of touch on that, the great thing about, like with Matthew and I, we've been in the industry and, where people see our faces, they know who we are. And so when I go to a new game, I actually bring players with me. They just follow me from game to game to game, bring the same in-jokes, teach those same jokes to everyone else, like the whole Hobbit thing, which started in my very first game. And I'm not actually a Hobbit, no matter what anybody says. And it just kind of goes from game to game. So the nice thing is like when I did my first stream, is all these people showed up to my stream and they managed it right through there. I didn't have to do a thing. They all just talked to the community, and the community was like, all right. But that's really hard for us because our job is to make the community trust us. And because if they don't trust what we're saying, then we're just another marketing mouth. And that we don't actually care about them on bringing their concerns to the development teams. So if you've got a very kind of homophobic kind of community, you're going to run into some problems. But I don't do anything. They just follow me and they seed it themselves. And then it brings more people out who didn't feel comfortable before. Are you giving us a time? Yeah. You got 5 minutes, Matthew.
Hi. Joe's comment about the resistance cell really struck me because I try to be an ally, but what I would really like to know is what kind of things allies have done that have been really effective for you guys. And that applies to people in general as well.
My favorite thing is, dude, that's not cool. Because, I have to say that straight white dudes like to hear it from other straight white dudes. And if everybody called out, I talk about this especially as a woman in games, is that anytime somebody makes a misogynist, hateful remark, just, dude, that's not cool. What are you thinking?
Right.
That is the number one easiest way to start, is just, stand up for the people around you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Part of that sort of online reputation that I have is I'm a bit of a, crusader into that sort of thing. In fact, I brought my T-shirt, my social justice druid T-shirt with me this week. And I find though that and regardless of what group you're talking about, right? Like what minority you're talking about, like as a gay man, when I stand up for myself, it's easy for my voice to get pushed aside by those who are really invested in not liking gay men or whatever it is that we're talking about. So it's very, and that's sort of a natural conflict, and it's easy for butting heads to happen, which is why 9 times out of 10, I have allies, I have friends and loved ones who step into those situations who say, look, that's totally not cool, which is, and I'm the same way. Like on my social media, I talk a lot about issues of like, racism and sexism and all of these things because, again, if I'm not sort of the target of those things for whatever weird reason, like it's something weird in the human psyche, in the bigot's psyche, that, because I'm not the one that's being targeted, me saying that is not cool. Like that is not okay. I know you think you're being funny or whatever, but you're just not. So something needs to change with all of this. For some reason, it always gets us stronger. So yeah, like honestly, I would say like just being willing to say, I know you think you're funny, but you're kind of not right now, like goes much further than when I say it, when it's about that sort of thing. Yeah, so.
I just wanted to add, on a development team, the real important about allies is that when you're the gay person or the woman or anybody who's a minority on the team, you kind of want to speak up, but you're always afraid of being that person in the meeting. The one that as soon as you all right, guys, I hate to bring this up again, and you kind of, whether it actually happens or not, you almost feel like half the people in the room are going to go, it's him again.
Sure,
and so
they're going to have something to say about this.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how'd you know?
It's not always even the case that you feel like you actually get dismissed, but you feel like you can only push it so much. So you kind of need some other people in the room to be there as well, saying, hey guys, maybe knock it with the boobs, or like stuff like that. It just needs to be carried around.
One more question, I think.
I had one last comment I was going to make. Like the one thing I try to do is, if somebody says, oh, that's so gay, or yeah, he was being so gay, I try to pull them aside and then just once and in private be like, hey, if you use it that way, that is a slur, and you might be offending people.
I have a tendency when somebody says that, especially people playing games when I'm playing tabletop games or playing Magic or something. It was like, dude, that's gay. And I was like, that's me? And they're like, what?
You're right.
Then,
You're right. That is fabulous.
But yeah, I mean, because it's a way to shut down teenagers. But because I'm actually still awkward teenager at times, but there's that whole awkwardness that comes about, and when you call somebody on it, in a kind of a there's times when I like come out swinging, and then there's times where just those quick, makes them think about what they're saying, because words matter, and teaching people that words matter is important. And I also use a lot of, oh, bless your heart.